All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory. Nuti Awa, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect, Slakia. And today is Monday, March 1st, 2026, Missile Monday. And I have this article from the BBC, and it says, France to boost nuclear arsenal and extend deterrence to European allies. So I'm just going to go into this article and bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And it says, France is to boost its nuclear arsenal and extend the deterrent to cover other European countries, and a major development of its nuclear defense policy. In the speech in Brittany, President Emmanuel Macron explained the changes as the response to an increasingly unstable strategic environment. The next 50 years will be an era of nuclear weapons, he said, which, nuclear weapons wouldn't exist in 50 years, Lord willing. Says, speaking to naval officers in front of a nuclear submarine at the Isle Lounge base near the port of Brest, he said the number of French nuclear warheads will be increased from their current level of around 300. He announced the launch in 2036 of a new nuclear-armed submarine called the Invincible. And with the way things are going now, again, man, another 10 years, come on, man, it's not going to take 10 years for, World War III to pop off, because Lord willing, this thing is going to happen, soon, probably sooner than we think. We just still have to wait for the last couple prophecies to take place first. But another 10 years, no, these nukes won't be around. Just speculation. But continuing on, it says, he said 8 other European countries, the UK, Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Greece, Sweden, and Denmark had agreed to participate in a new advanced deterrence strategy. And Germany, just singling out Germany alone, because Germany, you have to remember, a couple years ago, Germany was seeking help from the U.S., which, the U.S. pretty much, didn't respond. So what? Germany sought help. When I'm saying help, nuclear help from either France or, the UK. And right now, it seems that France is taking the initiative to, help protect these other European countries, Continuing, this is writing on X, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk referenced the decision saying, "We are arming up together with our friends so that our enemies will never dare to attack us." Macron said the 8 European countries could take part in exercises of France's air-launched nuclear capacity, or Force de Frappe, and also host air bases where France's nuclear bombers could be stationed. This would also allow France's strategic air forces to spread out across the depth of the European continent, and thus complicate the calculations of our adversaries, the president said. He added that France's partners would also share in the development of auxiliary capacities under the new nuclear doctrine: space-based alarm systems, air defense to shoot down incoming drones and missiles, and long-range missiles. Described by officials as the most significant change in France, Slovakia, the most significant change in French strategic thinking since 1960, advanced deterrence nonetheless retains much of the original concept as defined by then President Charles de Gaulle. There will be no explicit guarantee given to partner countries, and it is the President of France who will retain sole decision making power over when to fire a nuclear missile. The aim remains to convince potential adversaries that if they have the audacity to attack France, there will be an unsustainable price to be paid. The president said, well, France, even though they are a nuclear armed nation, they're not on the level of, the US and Russia, because these are the two nations that possess the most nuclear missiles or warheads in particular out of all of the current nuclear armed nations, man. Yes, they have their arsenal, but, they have what? It said 300. America has, over 5,000. Russia has about, 5 to 6,000, warheads. They have more than America, but either way it goes, they won't solely be able to take on these other nations if, they were to go to war. Because as we know or should know by now, the only thing these nations are truly gearing up for war as far as upping their nuclear arsenal is to come up against America, because they're not going to be shooting missiles at each other, though, excuse me, Slovakia, I personally believe that, America is going to bomb back. They have their specific targets, in different countries, but the majority of these nukes are going to hit here in America, man. And this is really what these different nations are gearing up for. Russia, North Korea, China, and I personally believe Iran does have nuclear weapons, but this is what these different nations are going to do. They're going to gear up, up their nuclear arsenal ultimately to come up against America. So continuing on, which I'm not going to read this whole thing. Well, it's not a super long article. So, actually, I may just read the whole thing. So, let me see right here. It says, until now, there has been a deliberate vagueness about what France regards as its vital interests, an attack on which would trigger a nuclear response. Of course, because of one country launches a nuke, then it's going to be a chain reaction. Every other nation is going to launch their nukes as well. In recent years, governments have hinted that vital interests could also include interests in Europe, with Macron's advanced deterrence. This concept has been given further shape, though in accordance with the general theory of deterrence, nothing is spelled out. Under the same principle, Macron said that from now on, France would no longer communicate to the world the number of nuclear warhead in its possession. I mean, either way it goes, I personally believe even like some of these numbers may be fabricated. Just speaking as a man, that they're actually more than what they say, because again, the primary two nations that have the most nuclear weapons are the United States and Russia. And they say they have about 5,000 or so, which again, they could have more than that. We don't know. But either way it goes, they're trying to conceal the number, which what's the point? Because once it comes down to use them, you're going to use them all. You're not going to be spared any. None will be spared. So I'm going to finish up. It says France already has a cooperation agreement with Europe's only other nuclear power, the United Kingdom. Recently, UK officials took part for the first time in exercises by France's FAS. Shortly after the speech, France and Germany jointly announced plans for closer cooperation in the field of nuclear deterrence. The two countries will take the first steps this year, including German participation in French nuclear exercises and the development of conventional capacities with European partners, according to a text signed by Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. This cooperation will complement, not replace, NATO's nuclear deterrent, they said. So again, this is really the only thing they're doing is upping their nuclear arsenal ultimately to come up against America, because it mentioned NATO, because again, man, these NATO nations, are going to come up against this place, man, and this is all they're doing now. Will they shoot nukes on other countries, on Russia and China, North Korea? We'll see. But as for the most important part, man, we know that again, these different nations, even America's allies, they're really gearing up just to come up against this place, man, because this place has not been invaded. This place has not seen war since the Civil War, but there's going to be another civil war here in America. Troops are going to invade this land, and ultimately these nukes are going to hit this place, man, because again, seeing the it's like the clip of that Jake that's over there in Dubai. He said, he met a Lebanese woman that said, she's never experienced anything like that. Oh yeah, man, people in America ain't used to that, obviously, especially over there, in Palestine and Israel, man. Those lands are getting bombs or getting bombed out, every other day, and every other day, every other week, if not every other week, every other month, there's rockets flying. So these are the things that they have to worry about, on a day-to-day basis. Here in America, people don't have to worry about that. But soon it's going to be worse. They are going to have to worry about that, man, because as soon as these nukes get launched, man, this is where they're coming to, America. So I'm not going to make this one too long. Just going to hit a couple main points, and that'll be it. Start with the book of Revelation, chapter 11. In verse 14, it says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And indeed, with these things that are taking place now, the bombing of Iran and Iran, responding to, the U.S. bombing them and killing their leader, so obviously, it's all a build-up to World War III. Obviously, it's not going to gear up into a full-scale war until, these last couple prophecies. Again, the main one being the mass implementation of the Mark of the Beast, which is the RFID microchip, that still has to come to pass, once Jacob Trouble reaches full bloom and all hell finally breaks loose, then that's when, this war is finally going to heat up, to a full-scale hot war. So there's the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, in verse 5, it says, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this should be of the burning and fuel of fire. And right, man, this coming world war isn't going to be like how traditional warfare was fought, where men would have the different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, battling each other on the battlefield, But what it says will be a burning and fuel of fire, because this war is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear weapons. And as I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other. But, that's primarily how this war is going to be fought, with that nuclear technology. So staying in Isaiah, I'm going to jump to chapter 54 and grab verse 16. And it says, Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster to destroy. And indeed, these modern day scientists and physicists, they are the smiths. What is a smith? A blacksmith, one that creates weapons, and not just any weapons, weapons of war. And in this case, in this current time we're living in, these scientists are developing, not just any old weapons of war, but weapons of mass destruction. Because these weapons, these nuclear weapons that are on the earth today, are extremely powerful, and have the capability of literally destroying the planet Earth. But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever. So the entire planet Earth won't be destroyed, but certain lands will. And as we know for sure, America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be destroyed and be left completely desolate. Isaiah the 34th chapter gives a very vivid description of how America is going to look after, that fire dies down, in the land of Israel. Because again, Jerusalem is going to be the headquarters, man. So of course it will be destroyed. The land has to be cleansed to get those rats out of there, and then it'll be made beautiful again. But as far as any other land that is going to get hit, we will have to wait and see. So let's get the book of Joel, chapter 3, and verse 9. And it says, Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. And indeed, this is what these nations are doing. And in this particular case, France, man, this is what they're doing. They're looking to increase their nuclear arsenal. They want to go from 300, nuclear warheads to, I don't know, who knows, however many, they're going to be able to produce before this war finally heats all the way up, Excuse me, but that's the weak saying they're strong, man, because they possess the very same technology that their allies have here in America, and this is what they're getting out for, to come up against this place, pursuant to Revelation chapter 17 and verse 16, So I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation chapter 9 and verse 5. It says, And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And right, when you read in Revelation, the 7th chapter, it mentions the 4 angels, which these are 4 literal angels holding back the 4 winds, which the four winds represent the destruction, that is going to take place here on the earth, World War III, if you will. Because there is a set time when it is going to take place. It's a particular hour, day, month, and year, when the Heavenly Father is going to allow this to play out, And it says to slay the third part of men, because you have 3 classes of men on the earth today. You have the sons of God, which today are known as the biblical Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the tribe of Judah, all the way down to the tribe of Issachar. And you have the sons of men, which are the different heathen nations. And you have the sons of the wicked, which are the nation of Edom, so-called white people, and they're the third part of men. That's who this destruction is for. It's for them, the wicked. But you will have 2/3 of the nation of Israel, pursuant to Zechariah 13 and 8. 2 parts are going to be cut off and die, for their wickedness. And then, the heathens, whatever heathens are over here, once this war finally kicks off, you're just collateral damage. You were just over here to make a little money and die. That was your purpose. you know. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. Peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say Shalom.